Don, can we talk? I'm Don, actually Donald, no D at the end. O'Malley, a detective with the City PD for more than 20 years. I'm a good detective, but I'm still unpromoted. Not that I can blame Captain Dockery, since I must admit that my mind tends to wander, especially during an investigation. The lady asking the question, is my wife of 24 years? Helena. Sure, babe. Or we could cut to the chase and get naked in bed. Helena is an enigma. In many ways, she lacks self-confidence. But, thanks to her mother, she has the arrogant air of a Spanish grandee. She is now 43, and she is as lovely now as she was when I first met her when she was 17. Her hair was black and glossy. Then, her skin was naturally beautiful, and her figure was slim. Now, the hair color and gloss are the result of a weekly visit to the salon. Makeup has replaced nature as the source of her beauty, and she has stopped looking below the neck. Her breasts have remained small, but have drifted south, and her bottom would look better on a much larger woman. Don't be frivolous, Don. Just getting naked isn't enough anymore. Our marriage has got a bit stale. I love you even more than the day Daddy walked me down the aisle, but we have lost the excitement. And is Helena's best friend at work. If she's not, she's not. If she ever appears on a TV quiz, her specialist subject will be divorce. She has gone through 3 of her own together with several assists. Recently, she has selected my wife to be her new wingman in her endless search for Mr. Right. I switch off while Helena continues to relay Anne's views on a happy marriage. Why don't we talk in bed? After we have intimacy, I ask, leering at her. Even if she was interested, she could not break the promise she made at lunchtime today. After so many years, even a lousy detective would know what his wife was thinking. I keep reading stories where a husband is blindsided by his wife's affair, despite the many clues she dropped. I detect the first hint. What Helena wants to say is that she intends to spend the weekend with Eric Spencer, a work colleague, young enough to be her son if I had impregnated her when we first met. She solemnly promised Eric that I was cut off from intimacy. It seems they play with a different deck. I thought a vow, as in marriage vows, trumped a promise. Don, I'm being serious. If you love me at all, please just sit down and talk to me. Well, I waited until we were married to get into your panties, so I suppose I can wait until we've chatted before we take the discussion to our marital bed. I magnanimously offered. I was in at the very start of Helena's romance with Eric. She and I were the other couple when Anne invited Eric to dinner in her apartment. It was obvious from the outset that Eric had no interest in his date, but was enamored of my wife. By the time we took coffee through to the living room, Eric and Helena were openly flirting, and Anne could barely contain her rage. I refused to be her consolation prize, and I think it was that made her determined to destroy my marriage. Don, you know I love you to bits. I fell for you the moment Daddy and I visited you in the hospital. More than anything, I want us to be together in our golden years. But you must admit that our marriage has become stale. She stopped and looked at me pleadingly. Over the years I have tried to meet her more than halfway. She comes up with an idea and I help her develop it and achieve her goal. Most of the things that bother her are of no importance to me, like the color of the drapes or the hemline of her dresses. I stand firm on things that really matter, which usually centered around some scheme of hers that would have harmed or embarrassed our 2 kids. Now they have left the nest. There is very little need for me to intervene between Helena and her latest craving. It's true that I was in hospital when we first met, an unworthy hero. Her father is the manager of a small bank which was being held up by a couple of crooks when my partner and I got the call. I was in uniform in those days, so we rolled up in black and white. I was making for the door of the bank when the bad guys came out, saw the patrol car and began shooting. I fired 9 shots, 3 of which hit the target. My partner fired 4 times before the gun jammed. 1 crook dead, the other wounded. Good outcome. It was after they fell that our troubles started. My partner was reprimanded. A jammed gun is a big no-no. I had fired from behind a parked pedestrian car. I had no idea the driver was in the vehicle until he opened his door and knocked me over, so I banged my head on the pavement. I was being treated for concussion when the bank manager visited bringing his 17-year-old daughter. He was running her to dance class, but she refused to stay alone in the car while he made the duty visit to the officer who had saved the bank's cash. I blame your work. We used to talk all the time and then rush upstairs. If you smiled at me like you do with that Eric guy, I'd be as hot for you as I was on our honeymoon. I answered. I had been enjoying winding her up with my irrelevant remarks, but I really needed to get this show on the road. Both Helena and I had agendas for this discussion. She wanted me to accept her weekend of intimacy as a prelude to an affair. I wanted her out of my life for good. Eric had bought the tickets for a spa hotel, which was her reason for urgency. I had resigned from my position with the police department and was moving 500 miles west at the end of the week. The difference was that I knew every detail of her plan and she knew nothing about my intentions. Why would you mention Eric? I hardly know him. It's you I love, Dawn. And I want to make sure our marriage lasts and doesn't just sink into the sand. The metaphor of sinking into the sand is in Helena's DNA. Her mother, Isabella, has constructed an alternative reality conjured out of romance novels about Spanish nobles. Her father, like her husband, was a bank manager who, while he didn't reach the heights, earned enough to keep his wife and daughter in the style of the Spanish court at the time of Christopher Columbus. Isabella convinced herself and her daughter, my wife, that the family were of royal blood, cruelly deprived of their inheritance by wicked cousins. Life must have been scary in medieval Spain, with every other noble child being kidnapped by aforesaid wicked cousins and left in the forest to be a snack for wolves. There seems to have been a steady trade in millers and foresters, collecting such infants and raising them as their own. Living in this unlikely world blurred the lines for Isabella. Any means that led to the desired objective were legitimate. I first suspected on my wedding day that not everything Helena and her mother said was strictly true. When we met, Helena had magnificent black hair that reached her waist. After we were engaged, I was allowed to stand behind her in her parents' living room, brushing her shiny tresses while she watched TV and chatted with her mom. That was as intimate as we got since she had vowed that she would be chaste on her wedding day. I found out that was a lie a year after our second child was born. It was another year before I became aware that she made decisions without even thinking of consulting me. From then on, my love died, and I remained for the sake of our 2 kids. Have I got the name wrong? I politely inquired. I understood you were spending the weekend with Eric Spencer at the Heyday Hotel in Spa. Helena's face flushed under her makeup while her mouth opened and closed much like a freshly landed fish. I was in a bar with a colleague when my youngest was nearly 3. We had got on the subject of health costs, and I noted the huge increase in the cost between the births of my 2 daughters. He had not noticed a similar change in very similar circumstances. The next day I checked the detailed bills from the hospitals, and there it was, in black and white. Tubal ligation. Both girls were born by cesarean section. Helen had decided to have her tubes tied without mentioning it to me. It would have been less of a blow if we hadn't discussed contraception during her pregnancy. I offered to have the snip, which Helena rejected with horror. I need you to be a man. Can you picture the derision of a fighting bull trotted out to meet the matador without his cojones? She called off any further discussion until she had consulted her mother. When we resumed relations after the birth, she assured me that the problem was fixed. There was no sign of an insert, so I assumed she had an IUD or was taking the pill. It's not like you think, Dawn. Just let me explain so you understand that it has nothing to do with my love for you. She recovered more rapidly than I expected. I guess she expected she would have to explain this and had probably rehearsed her reply with Anne. It's mainly to support Anne. Like that dinner date we had with her and Eric, remember? Getting her tubes tied wasn't the first unilateral decision. On our wedding day, I was astonished to find that Helena's beautiful hair had been cut to a brief bob barely reaching her ears. I promised it to Father Liam as a wedding gift. Why not tell me? I was astonished to find that natural hair of that length was almost as valuable as gold ounce for ounce. Later, when her mum got smashed, I heard another version. Long hair was part of the battery of devices to catch a husband. Once I had exchanged vows, there was no longer a need for long hair. You men have no idea what a pain it is to manage the stupid stuff. Shouldn't it be you and me with and her bow? Perhaps she's hoping you flirt with the new man and leave Eric to her. She was certainly mad with you for flirting with him at the dinner party, I answered. Father Liam turned out to be interested in more than Helena's long hair. When my youngest was almost 2, he was brought into the station in handcuffs, a victim of a mixed marriage. The mother had been a member of the Good Father's flock since childhood and had attended his confirmation classes. Her husband was not a Catholic and did not understand the need for the father to use his ancient prick for spiritual guidance. Father Liam acknowledged that he might have broken civil law, but he pled not guilty since he was obeying God's law. Confirmation was not just to prepare the spirit. A girl had to learn to become a woman able to care for her husband, keeping the family together and raising lots of little Catholics. Neither oral nor penetrative intimacy was natural and so had to be taught. Emotions can run high, so the safest teacher was the parish priest, sworn to celibacy. His defense might have swayed the jury until a grandmother was interviewed by the police. She, her daughter and her granddaughter, had all been confirmed by Father Liam. She acknowledged that in each case the purpose was to prepare the girl for marriage. All went well until the interviewing officer asked her if she had enjoyed the intimacy. It's the best intimacy I've had in my life, and I've buried 2 husbands. I've been back often so the father can give me a refresher course. Her lawyer objected, but the damage was done. All the while I had been repressing my sexual urges, fobbed off by brushing her long hair, Helena was having twice weekly intimacy romps with a celibate priest 50 years older than her. Donnie honey, it's all for us. I've been a wonderful wife and mother, and I have every intention of continuing to be so. I've run out of ideas for pleasing you in bed. This weekend with Eric is simply to widen my perspectives. It means nothing, I hardly know him, but he is young and enthusiastic. I will come back on Monday full of new ideas. We'll both benefit, my love. I haven't loved my wife for 18 years, but I still care for her, so I checked out Eric before I decided to dump her onto the poor sucker. He has never been married, although he has had a number of serious relationships. They all founded in his relationship with his mother. His father died when he was about 4, after which mommy became father and mother. He left home to attend college, but moved back in with his mom after his freshman year when she sold up and bought a house within walking distance of the campus. When he was promoted about 8 months ago, he had to move and has been living ever since in a studio apartment. Officially, he is searching for a suitable property that mommy can buy so he can move back in. Reading between the lines, he is in no hurry. He has had several dates with work colleagues, and it now appears that he has everything he needs. Helena is almost as old as his mother, but, unlike mommy, she is sexually available. I don't feel comfortable with this arrangement, I said, looking her straight in the eye. This was a critical moment when I would need to choose my words carefully. It's not fair. Fair is the key word. In Helena and Isabella's world, fairness is everything. They are, at least in their own opinion, Spanish nobility, noblesse oblige, and all that sort of thing. A Spanish hidalgo will die of disgrace if he behaves unfairly. Helena reached across the table to stroke my hand, thinking that I felt I was being treated unfairly. Eric seems a decent young man, and it is not fair for you to have animal intimacy without feelings. If he means nothing to you, why not buy a vibrator? This is a direct hit on the foundations of her dream world. Love is the ichor of life, circulating in the soul as blood flows through the body. Intimacy without love is dirty and unacceptable. I think I should talk to mommy, she whispered, looking very disturbed. I crashed my fist on the table between us. Not this time, Helena. This is between us, here and now. Do you have feelings for Eric or not? My heart rate had risen. Smith warned me that I was running my head into a noose, but I was confident that I knew Helena well enough to get this right. I could have left her a note with my wedding band and slipped away without risking this confrontation. That would have crushed my wife. I wanted to offer her an alternative that would allow her hope for the future and preserve her dignity. She had been conditioned by her mother and her parish priest. She had been a good mother and, thanks to Father Liam, an enthusiastic and inventive companion in bed. I'm so sorry, Donnie. You're right, of course. I do have feelings for Eric. I still love you more than anything. More than Eric, I'm sure. At first, I felt motherly towards him. This was the first time, really. He had been away from his own mommy, and I thought he was missing her. We've been lunching together every day, and it turns out that his feelings for me are not at all maternal. I was shocked at first, but gradually my heart opened to him. This weekend away is to give me the chance to see if what I feel for him is more than pity. Whatever the result, you will always be first in my affections. I will gently persuade Eric to pick someone who is available. He is very young, Dawn. I was born in America, but I'm Irish on both sides, so I'm an incurable romantic. I can understand Helena's feelings for Eric because I have to be in love to be able to function properly. When I fell out of love with my wife, I fell in love with a colleague. We were lovers for several years before her biological clock began ticking. She insisted that I get divorced, but I couldn't leave my children. My lover dropped me and married another detective. She offered to continue the affair, even saying I could father her children, but that disgusted me, so I dropped her. After a few lonely years, I met Smith Shirley. She's heard all the jokes about having her first and last names reversed. She is a doctor of psychology teaching at the university, with a part-time role as a police psychologist. She took the police job to get material for academic papers to enhance her chances of tenure. Her big project was a study of the psychology of detection. She had been in the post for about a month when we fell in love. This weekend away is almost the worst thing you can do. Whatever feelings you have for Eric will develop in a hothouse atmosphere very different from real life. We've enjoyed many good times like the spa break, but we've also been through the bad times. You're not giving him the chance to see you in a relaxed, everyday situation. There must be a better way of exploring your developing feelings. I was ready to divorce Helena 3 years ago when our youngest went to college, but Smith insisted that we wait until she had secured tenure at the university. In that waiting period, her biological clock has been getting louder and louder. Now she is tenured and pregnant, so this conversation with Helena must end in divorce. What I want is for my wife of 24 years to leave our marriage happy and eagerly looking forward to her new life. That's all very well done, but I can hardly tell him that I'll call him when I have a cold or on my period. To tell you the truth, I was in no hurry to divorce Helena at the time Smith asked for a postponement. When my affair with Smith began, I was one of 5 lovers. She was sharing her bed with another 3 detectives and a graduate student. She was still gathering evidence for her academic paper on the psychology of detection and was using pillow talk to extend her knowledge of the subject. Once the paper was drafted, she dropped the other 3. The grad student was part of her mentoring duties and the present guy was one of a succession. She dropped them once their thesis was accepted or passed or whatever they did with it. I didn't mind the infidelity, but Smith proved to be as economical with the truth as my wife. There was at least a suggestion of jumping from the frying pan into the fire and leaving Helena for Smith. Of course, I couldn't ask my lover to be exclusive while I was sharing a bed with my wife. I was thinking about Eric's tiny flat Helena. It reminds me of how we started off. I reached out and held her hand, giving her a fond look. In fact, there's a lot in common. You and I didn't have intimacy until we moved into that flat, just like you and Eric. It was while we lived there that we really built the relationship that has lasted almost a quarter of a century. I can't help feeling that you and Eric deserve the same chance to explore your feelings. I squeezed her hand and gave a theatrical sigh. Happy days. Smith is a great planner. When the baby arrives, I will be retired and will become a house husband, mainly responsible for the development of the infant for the next 20 years or so. All we've been waiting for was the indication on the stick that confirmed pregnancy. Now that the starting pistol had been fired, so to speak, the timetable was set. Helena had to go, and I had to retire from the department, which I had already done. Captain Doherty had been particularly helpful. It sounds wonderful, Don, but is it fair to you? After all, you're the man I love. Checkmate in 3 moves, I think. You're very sweet, Helena, but the alternative is for your possible romance to drag on for months. Far better to leave now and live with Eric for 3 months as husband and wife. By that time, not only will you both know how you feel, but all of us can work out the relationships for the future. It's not a perfect solution, but it will minimize the hurt. I had packed everything in my truck earlier, so I could make a quick getaway even if Helena didn't swallow this pile of bull. If you're sure, Donnie, but when could we do it? I took both her hands in mine. No time like the present.
Would El Cid have delayed?
El Cid is a Spanish hero who expelled the Moors. I helped her pack what she needed, and she was ready to leave in less than an hour. There was one minor dispute when I declined to meet Eric. She wanted me to shake his hand and explain everything to him. I used the, "if you loved me as much as I love you," gambit. This is hard for me, Helena. I'm afraid that I will break down if I see you and Eric together. I promise that I will sit with him in 3 months when we settle the future. I was afraid that Eric, who is a really nice guy, would go all noble if he met me and refused to take Helena off my hands. When she had gone, I prepared the house as you do for a holiday. I unplugged all appliances, opened the freezer door, and emptied the fridge. I loaded all the garbage into my truck, stopping at a dumpster on the way to Smith's condo. I drove into the car park of an abandoned strip mall, the headlights picking up the unmistakable sight of the captain's official vehicle. Driving out again, I passed the condo, lightly blowing the horn as I passed. From there I turned onto the street leading to the Interstate West, leaving Smith in my rearview mirror. Smith's plan for me to raise her infant had one serious flaw from my point of view. She did not want my sperm to impregnate her. I was reliable, trustworthy, and easily manipulated. All the qualities she wanted in the man who would raise the infant. She also wanted the sperm donor to be a virile alpha male. For the purposes of conception, she had chosen Captain Doherty. I was on my way to Sacramento to start a new life as a partner in a successful private investigation agency. Do you remember my partner whose gun jammed? She left the force soon after, moved west, and built the private investigator agency in Sacramento. We had been an item before the bank heist, after which I dumped her to court Helena. Emma and I met at a convention in Las Vegas 2 years ago and found that the spark between us reignited into a warming blaze. It's a pity that Helena and Smith had to be signed. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day. So click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.